I'm Doug Crets. I'm a graduate of the JMSC program at University of Hong Kong. It's a Journalism and Media Studies Center. I graduated in 2004 or 5, around that area. It's unclear to me when that actually was. And I'm joined on this panel, which is going to be about media and growth and traction for startups, and in general for building a business, by May Yamaura. She is with the company BrandPit. This is Kath Tan from Notey, and Ben Cheng from a company called OurSky. And before I let them give a pitch about what it is each of their company does, I just want to very briefly tell you a little bit about each one of these people, not to steal the limelight from you at all. May is from Japan and worked actually in Portland, Oregon for a little while for a company called LogicBox Software. And you also worked in client services for a Japanese company. I don't know the name of the Japanese, something...
Oh, it's an American company based in Japan. When I was in Japan, I also worked for an American research company. And then my responsibility is to sales and sales assistant. Okay. Catherine, which do you prefer?
Either, whatever you prefer.
Okay. Kath has a background in Barclays and also with Morgan Stanley. Worked in the finance industry for a while, and she started Notey with her husband here in Hong Kong and also in Vancouver and also in San Francisco. So that's an interesting story that you can tell. And Ben has an engineering degree from Chinese University of Hong Kong, specializes in things like Android, Python, PHP, mobile app development, and those are those people. So I would like to start by having each of you describe to the crowd what it is that your company does and sort of give your pitch to everybody.
Hello, my name is May. I'm a co-founder of a company called BrandPit. So basically, we help brands to measure their online exposure by using image recognition technology. So at this moment, actually 1.8 billion photos are uploaded on social media, and 80% of photos do not have hashtag or keywords. Like, when you take a selfie with friends at a bar grabbing beer, you never really type the name of the beer that you're drinking, right? So we figure that there are some disadvantage of existing analytic tools, because existing analytic tools are all keyword-based, so that's why we created BrandPit. So ideally, we can scan images on social media and find logos, products, people, and then to identify who's actually consuming which kind of products in when and where, so that we can provide insights to brands. That's what we do. Yes, thank you.
Hi, I'm Catherine. I'm co-founder of Notey, and we find the best blogs on over 500,000 topics. So there are millions of articles out there. How do you find the best? So we help you curate the best stories from independent publishers and blogs. And we have a website and an iPhone app.
I'm Ben from OurSky. So OurSky is actually a web and mobile apps design, development, and analytics service company. And besides doing service for startups or corporates, we do run a few apps on our own. We own an online SaaS product for small business called Pandaform with 6,000 subscribers. And we have a few mobile apps, including Label Boss with over 3 million downloads. And a few months ago, actually 2 months ago, we launched a new music app called J Player, which for the first 2 weeks, we already got 300K downloads, and we are still tuning for retention. So that's what we do.
Thank you. So the first question I have is that each of you is building a very different type of company. So I'm imagining that all three of you have very different stories. Ben, my first question is for you. When you're getting ready to launch a mobile app, how do you think about media, and what types of media do you look for to get people to know about what you're doing?
So it also depends on the kind of the things we are doing. For example, for Pandaform, like I just mentioned, that's actually our first product. My team did it 5 almost like 5 years ago when we started to doing this thing. And then the nature of this product is like basically it's subscription service. So that means when the users sign up, they come in, we already getting paid from their subscription like 30 days later after the trial period. So at that sense, so in that case, obviously, like for us, it's like how do we spend the money so that each user acquisition cost is lower than their LTV? That's very simple. A very simple math questions. So then the media we focus on would be like pay advertising, or how do we spend the money to get us coverage on as much blog posts as possible when we launch. We did a launch in Singapore, Echelon, and then we have a few media coverage from different tab board, and then afterwards, then it is basically pay acquisition. But then for something like maybe for iPhone app, then the problem is always like until you get a certain traction, you don't really know the retention. You don't really know like how much you are going to get paid, or how, or even like sometimes it's how you're going to get paid from the app. Then at that point, like we would try to focus on the channel that is more like free, like cheaper. Like for example, one obvious one is like try to make your app as good as possible so that Apple will feature it on your on their app store. So that's basically free platform. Or like in our case, since that is a music app, so we try to negotiate with different music news site, music platform, community forum, etc. to like let them like we basically like have a small amount of budget to try to get them talk about us, and then we will see and evaluate each channel separately. So that's what we do, the approach.
Got it. And have you, just to follow up with the cost issue, have you ever received investment money for your company, or have you primarily gotten all of your money from sales?
Except the music app, all of the other things we do are basically from our own pocket. Yeah.
Okay, got it. Kath, I'm going to ask a similar question to you. You have received investment for your company.
Yes.
I think it's $1 million US.
Yes, we've raised 1.6 million US.
Right.
We closed around end of last year.
Okay.
From Asian-based investors as well as a few tech angel investors.
Okay, and the question I have for you, and you might have to hold the microphone a little closer, is what role does narrative or media play when you're going around, or where you went around and found investment money for this company? Or was it ever a part of your plan to put that in place before you went out for that money?
I guess the answer to your question is no. We actually did not have a PR and marketing plan because for Notey, we're a consumer product. So we wanted to, what we did was we actually had feedback groups where we were able to iterate our product freely just through, let's say, targeting university students or like bloggers and so forth, and then get our product to a place where we knew media would be interested in. And so we actually did not have a media plan, but we did, let's say, talk to bloggers who wrote about us. Mm-hmm. I think separately, I do try to talk about the story behind Notey, like why I started it, like why would I quit like a secure job in banking for an idea that I thought could be big, that's worth it. So I think all of that, like, people remember stories. So, for example, I just met someone here from Morgan Stanley who read my blog post on Women 2.0 and LinkedIn about the story behind Notey. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, there's different ways for one to leverage media to get to investors.
I got it. So if you can just bring us through the evolution of this company then. You were iterating Notey, you were trying to build it into a company, correct. And then what happened to spur this need to then have a media and marketing plan? What was sort of the triggering point? Where you realized that you had to actually start telling a story about what was going on?
I think the first time we knew we were getting some traction was, I think, last fall when we, one of the stories on Notey, when we were on private beta, so, we didn't have many users, went a little bit viral. Like we had maybe like 60, 70,000 unique visitors just from one story. That's when we knew, like, if we created better stories, if we were able to find more blogs, like, we can go far. So I think it's like data evidence that showed us, okay, we have something here. I think secondly was getting featured on Product Hunt. And although it's not traditional media, like it has an audience, it has an opinion. So we define it as media. And if you're, interested in startup, you definitely should check it out. It curates the best, startups every day, or products every day. And we did really well. Like we were inadvertently featured. Like someone from one of the top product hunters put us on, and we got great feedback from the community. So that's when we knew we were ready to, announce our funding and get out through, let's say, TechCrunch and traditional media.
Got it. Okay. May, and I have a question for you. You have sort of an enterprise-focused company, which means that you have to sell to brands. So what goes into your planning for telling that story, and what are the things that you have to consider when you're approaching a brand to sell your product to them?
So at first, we focusing on B2B. We have to sell our products to brands, ad agencies, marketing companies. At that time, especially in Asia, your credibility matters more than what you're actually providing. So in order to get the credibility, PR in media for us was pretty critical. So, but then ideally we wanted to be exposed in the articles which can be read by our potential clients. But then it's pretty hard to be covered by those marketing well-known magazines or articles first. So what we had to do was to start from being exposed in startup articles and so forth. That's how we started. And in order for us to do that, it was a little bit tough. We try to go pitch at any kind of pitching competition at startups event so that those writers have to learn about us. So that's how we started on covering PR step by step. Then actually we've been running this business for about 2 years. Launched our product last fall or summer. At first, no company was interested in talking to us, but once after we got more coverage on media, they started talking to us. So, and then the good thing is we actually acquired one of the biggest consumer goods companies, Unilever. So that helped us to talk to clients.
So you're saying, help me understand. So you're saying that once you pitched and got accepted by a really big client, are you saying that they actually ended up doing the talking for you, or do you say that you use that brand as a way of selling yours to other brands? Is it a question?
Both. Yes, both. Yes.
So what does a big company like Unilever do for you to make sure that you're getting the exposure that you need to?
Oh.
What does Unilever do for you in telling your story? What do they do for you to support that?
Sorry. So Unilever doesn't really help us to.
Okay, that's what I was wondering.
Sorry.
That's what I was wondering.
Yeah.
So they're not actually going and
No.
pitching it to other areas in their company.
No, they don't.
No? Okay.
But then having us a big client helps us to talk
Sell
to
yourself
sales
more.
more.
Okay. So I want to actually get into stuff because I think marketing and media can be very technical and it can seem very abstract because nowadays you might ask, what is media exactly? Because this is media in a sense because we're being relayed through channels and whatnot. I want to talk about your personal stories and your personal growth from when you first started working on the company to where you are now. And I want to start by asking questions about success and also about failure. The first question is, for each one of you, when did you do something wrong that you felt like you shouldn't have done it? And what was the lesson that you learned from that? In the hopes of maybe giving some advice to other people who might be thinking of doing a startup. Kath, can we start with you? I know it means
things that we.
Where did you make a mistake in your early days?
I guess one mistake we made was while we were. I think we should have, and this is especially important if you're thinking of starting a startup, is to design first and then build later. I think we wasted a lot of money putting a tech team together and building a really great topic-based ecosystem without really focusing on design and user experience, because that's tremendously important, especially for consumer products, not just consumer, even enterprise products. Like user experience is so important that's what we should have done first. So that's one thing. And two, I think fire fast. I think it's really difficult.
Did you have to fire somebody?
We did, but it took too long. And it's nothing wrong. Like everyone, there are great engineers or like people really good at what they're doing, but they didn't really share our vision. And it's like hard. Like when you're in a startup, you have bad days and you have great days, right? But having one bad apple really destroys the culture of the team. And, the first 10, 20 employees sets the culture for your company. So I think fire fast is really important. And fire, part amicably, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's what I
Okay, Ben?
learned.
Any early on lessons that you learned from
This
starting
question is so difficult because, I make mistake and I screw up like almost every day, I think. So this is like...
Good, it was a good question.
Okay. Yeah, but I actually want to elaborate more on like the design first thing on the usability. I actually think it's not just about the usability, but also about like if you do design first thing is designer, usually design is cheaper. So if you have a design, then you can actually test a lot more things than usability. You can test like how will people perceive this product, how will people even like when they haven't launched your app, like maybe they see your app on the App Store, how will they react on your app name, description, screenshot? So that's one thing that I always want to always hope that I would do this first before I do the app, do the actual development first. That's the biggest mistake I have made money-wise. And then another thing I think I kind of like regret is like in the early day when I start doing our own product or helping, even sometimes helping our clients to plan the product, we actually like always thought about like since we are developer, since we know development is costly, so we forgot to budget for like, hey, 6 months after you launch, what are you going to do? How much are you going to spend on getting the customers? How much time or how much money you're going to spend on iterating on your product until to a point that you can either show to your investor that they should keep investing on it or to give yourself confidence that you should continue to work on it or show it to your mom so that if you are so lucky and if you have a mom and dad can give you all the money, you can convince them to keep going on. So that is one thing I regret, and that means, like for example, like for my team, our team now mostly consists of developers, and then we have a really weird structure is that we are really strong in development process, but we are actually very weak on the marketing. We just have a few marketing people, analytics. Luckily, we can hire a few experts from other company, but that still can't compensate for the years of like we didn't give much focus on this department.
May, what about you?
Also, as Kath mentioned about product market fit, you want to make sure that to build products that your clients or your users want to use. So we also built our stuff, our product a bit early before talking to actual potential users. So that's something that we should have talked to. At least we should have interviewed to the potential clients, potential users of our product to figure we are just building something that's really needed for, yeah.
I got it. I understand. So why Hong Kong? Why build a company here versus anywhere else in the world? I mean, Silicon Valley is a place that most people go to launch a company. Why would you focus on this city in particular?
So for us, we've actually doing our business based in Japan, but we registered a company in Hong Kong. There are a couple of reasons of that. So first, actually my co-founder, he is a Hong Kongese living in Japan. So that sort of made sense for us. We were sort of saying which is better for us to have a company in Japan or Hong Kong. And we figured that Hong Kong, since one of our potential clients are ad agencies, the number of ad agencies are much more here in Hong Kong, and those agencies have their headquarters in US or in the UK. So for us, it makes us much easier to expand our business into those areas. And also, we want to monitor China market too, which a lot of Western brands are interested in to get in. So that's how we chose Hong Kong.
Okay. You have a little bit of a different story because I feel like you're in 3 different places at once. You're in Vancouver, San Francisco.
Well, we want to get feedback from where our core users are. So, that's why we spend a lot of time in the U.S. because, the bulk of our users are actually in the U.S. But we're in Hong Kong because I'm from Hong Kong, even though I don't look like it. Doug didn't know. I'm all about Hong Kong. So I grew up. I went to international school, and then I went to university in the UK, and then I worked there for a year, and then I came back. So it made sense to start a company here. It's like you get really great talent. There's great engineers in Hong Kong, and Hong Kong's a really good place. Like it's if you want to get into China, it's like the epicenter in Asia for like the West and also the East. Like people, when we're in the Valley and we stay in Hong Kong, they have tremendous respect for Hong Kong people. So I think Hong Kong is a great place to start a startup, and I think especially in how far the ecosystem has grown in the last 2 to 3 years. And I think the funding situation is also getting a lot better. Yeah. Like a lot of people ask, how do you get so much funding? And everyone has to hustle. We were just in New York 2 weeks ago, and there are, great entrepreneurs there that are also struggling to raise their seed round. Like anywhere outside the Valley, you just have to, there is no rules with fundraising. Like you just have to get out there, get your product out there. Someone will believe in you, and you'll get funding. Hong Kong is a great place for a startup.
I want to just turn back to the audience and ask a question. How many of you in the audience are going to be graduating from school in the next couple of years? Are there any upcoming college graduates here? So for those people who are getting ready to go out in the work world, is there any advice that you could give them about whether or not they should start their own whether they start their own company or they go into corporate life? What are the things that they should be paying attention to with their own stories, with their own sort of brand as they go into the working world? Ben, I mean, you.
Yeah, I can share a bit my personal background. It's after I graduated from the Chinese University of Hong Kong, I worked in JMSC for 6 months or something, and then I started a company right after that. If you ask me 3 years or 4 years ago about should you just start a company right away, I would definitely say yes, you should. And I think the advantage is basically is opportunity cost. You don't really have any financial burden. You don't have the urge of getting married, supposedly, or any kind of that kind of financial burden, or you don't have a track record of having a really high, good paying job, something like that. I didn't say JMSC didn't pay me well. Actually, they did pay me quite well. So just for the record, and then so basically it's opportunity cost. I think it's good. If you start. But now I would say I think it depends on 2 things. One thing is you should ask yourself is that are you that kind of person? Do you have the personality of you want to rely on your own? You want to you're not afraid of going bankrupt once every few weeks, especially in the early days. Do you want to take the pressure of your fellows or your parents? Let me get this straight. 3 or 4 years, after you graduate, if you compare yourself, if you're doing a startup right after you graduate, you compare yourself with those who go to big corporate, you are going to get, looks like you are much poorer. You are going to get paid much less, and you are going to have a much more financial burden because you are paying somebody else a lot every month. So that is kind of pressure from both from your fellows and your parents. So that's one thing you have to consider. Second thing is like a lot of time I think doing a company is like you gonna get some edge compared with others. So that's why some investor would ask you when you're doing the pitch, after you say the whole grand story, they will ask like, why you? And then the problem of a student is because there's just so many graduates out there, so you don't have any in-depth industry experience compared with others. So if you want to do a startup, like, hey, I want to compare, I want to integrate my knowledge in factory inventory with my knowledge from computer science department to do with my friends who graduate from PolyU with a good design skills to make a really usable factory inventory management software. You don't have any edge on that. You have never worked in the industry. So that is two things you want to consider if you want to start the company right away.
Great, thank you. Can I just turn some questions over to the audience? Does anyone have any questions for the people on our panel? Because I feel like I want to give you the things that you're looking for. No? Yes, young lady in the red.
Okay, thank you for your question. So first of all, at this moment, we've launched a product about last fall and summer, and then we are covering social media platform, Weibo, at this moment, just Weibo, Instagram, and we recently added Twitter. But the thing is that it's pretty easy for us to get into new social media platform. It will take about 1 week for us to set it up. But then since none of our clients requested us to go into other social media platforms, so that's why we haven't covered others. So not only like social media, we could do analytics on like blogs, and as long as the photos are available, we can run analytics. But then what we were being careful is we only analyze images that's been available publicly. We do not touch any private photos unless we work with the social media platform providers. We recently got one of the biggest platform providers actually reached us out to analyze how consumers, how end users, or how social media users are using their platforms to identify how people are engaging their social media platform, and so that they can put the advertisement in a more effective way. And the second is Google. It's pretty interesting. If Google get into analytic field, no one can. They can kill us. Not only us. They could kill all the analytic companies. But then even for text analysis, even for text, Google has the best analyzing text-based searching method. Like, for example, if you Google Apple Watch, then no results coming up for the Fritz uploads, right? So their text engine is one of the best too, but then they never got into text-based analytics field. So we concluded that they also never get into image recognition analytic field as well.
So basically, I think just to reiterate, I guess you're saying that if Facebook or Google comes up with a very similar technology and then tries to launch that globally, you don't feel that you're outclassed or outcompeted against? Because you don't think...
Not at us, but also any others.
Right. Okay. Well, that's fair enough.
but then they have.
That's pretty bold, though. Is that? Well, that's a good question. Is that part of the message you send to people in the enterprise that you say? No. I mean, I think your question is a little biased because you work for Facebook, right? Is that okay? But would an enterprise person sitting down with you and trying to have a discussion about taking on your product say the same thing? Well, why wouldn't I just wait for Facebook to come up with the same, analysis, and then my marketing team could just use it on their own through Facebook or through Google?
No, like in terms of Google, I don't think we do not think they get into analytic field because they could have got into analytic field when they had the best text-based search engine technology.
Right. So you think they're just not even going to be focused on it? So it's
focused.
More like self-driving cars, robotics, drones, stuff like that. Maybe that's a legitimate issue. Sir, you had a question. You in the pink shirt. And I'll try to repeat the question in case you can't hear. Go ahead.
Right. So my question is, how do you retain or how do you attract and retain talents? Like in Hong Kong, we've got big banks like offering good salaries and agencies often taking up the top talents. How do you do that? But also like Hong Kong's education system is very much kind of like a bias, molds you into more corporate kind of career rather than entrepreneur.
Yeah. So in case nobody heard, I think the gist of the question was, how do you attract and retain talent when there are many finance organizations and other big businesses in Hong Kong who can pay their entry-level people a lot of money, and you're not making a lot of money as a startup, I guess, in the beginning. And also the education system itself is sort of biased towards a corporate sort of culture. So, Ben, do you want to, you sort of started from scratch here.
36 employees.
And you already have 34 or 36 employees, is that right?
34.
34 employees. How did you do that?
Then of course, I think I would say that of course, I understand the corporate or the agency can pay much better, but then for a lot of people, first thing, let me focus on engineer first. For a lot of people, first thing, money isn't anything, right? If money is everything, then I should just go to Bay Area and work in Google or something. Then the question is how do you make people want to work there? So for us, we actually try to do a few things. One thing is technical wise, we try to keep the cutting edge, keep using cutting edge technology, so that people know when they come in, they can just do anything they want. They can just use the latest thing, the latest cool stuff they see on Hacker News. Then the second thing is then the other thing is we have a very different culture, I think. Because for me, when I started, I didn't even thought about I'm doing a startup. So I always describe myself as people doing a coffee shop for developers more. So I think it's kind of the people we attracted are people who more enjoy the company that respect them for any kind of technical discussions. We respect anyone can. Even they can switch the role, some developers, having worked for 3 years, they can switch to work as a growth hacker or marketers or product managers, different things.
Don't you also have a no assholes rule?
Yep.
I've seen this in your job advertising. What is the no asshole rule?
Well, basically, it's we wouldn't fire, I know I regret sometimes it's hire slow, fire fast. We didn't do it good enough. But then we also don't just fire people because they have a few months of downturns or something like that. But then we have one basic rule is when we interview, the team, if anyone in the team doesn't feel like we want to stay with the person after work for drinks, or in the work, if we find that he's he tried to play office politics or dishonest, we will fire him right away, like literally. Well then, I mean, when we were a team of like 12 people, that works pretty well. Now we are a team of like 30-something people. We still try to keep the atmosphere as nice, friendly, as family as possible. But like people would be like, some people have been working around for 6 years already, so that's kind of different. But having said that, I want to add one thing. Is like you are right in one regard. Is like this is really tricky to attract engineering talent if they are comparing your company with Google, Facebook, Apple, or any cool startup in Bay Area. So what we find is like, hey, they do the cutting edge technology too, and they have the volume of data that you can't compete with. So the things we learn is like for last 2 years, in our engineering hiring funnels, we found that our competitors are either other local startups or mostly a company in Bay Area. That is a hard problem for Hong Kong, I think, in general.
Kath, do you have a similar rule or a similar perspective about?
Well, we try to build a really, friendly startup culture. So like I said before, it's really important that, people really care about our vision. I think that's the most important thing. Like if you have to deploy midnight because I have a really important meeting in the valley, like you're game for it or you're as excited as everyone else. We try to, what we can't do in, crazy US dollar 6-figure salaries is that, we give them a gym membership. We have medical and dental, which a lot of local firms don't have. Like, so we care about like, or when, one of our head developers, he really cared about Occupy Central and, we allowed him to protest. Like, like giving, it's so much of a family. Like we actually started Notey in our study room in our apartment in Hong Kong. So they've seen me wake up in my pajamas, right? So that's part of our culture. And, and I think, our team now are very committed, like, and I don't see, like retention being an issue for us. I think, it's definitely helped that we've had, some international coverage, like with TechCrunch and Business Insider, because it does put us, not just as a Hong Kong company, but really a global one.
Yeah.
And I think it then, people's perception is that they're working for, what we're trying to accomplish is really building, one of the top 10 websites, right? So, if they want to be with the next Facebook or Pinterest, or would love anyone to come on board. So, if anyone here, shares our vision, reach out, use the product, of course, first. But yeah, so that's some of the things we do.
I imagine when you get up every morning and you're making something that's your own, it's probably a lot easier to tell that story to people about why you're doing what you're doing, because you're putting your flesh and blood into it, right? And you're not worried about doing it for other people. You're doing it for yourself and doing it for the people who are working with you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So like I guess going back, like I feel like I work for my employees too. So a lot of people like kind of think, being an entrepreneur gives you a lot of freedom. No, like I need to make sure that my employees are happy.
Yeah.
I need to make sure that my investors are happy. And like the most important thing is making sure our users are happy, right? So employees are definitely like one of the 3 things that I'm working really hard, like 18-hour days, every day, every weekend for.
Yeah. And May, how big is your team now? Is it still just you and your co-founder?
Oh, full-time at this moment, yes.
Full-time, it's you guys. Okay. Look, we have time for one more question from the audience. Oh, we have 2. Would you like to ask your question? Go ahead.
So first of all, Douglas, that last thing that you talked about success is important. It's not a question, but some of you actually told me to start it again. I started a company with my wife. I asked her to live with me together and work that product for my son. So that's the same mentality that we had at Notey. Now the challenge is like what Ben said. To me, the topic is gaining traction and customer exposure. We all, like Ben, have a lot of programmers and engineers. Now we want to get more marketing staff. And what you just told us about the culture about engineers in the room and no asshole rules and stuff. But then like fucking girls among the boys, and then suddenly it becomes like a communication or cultural thing. That's something that people ask better to share. Is that such a things inside to tackle some of the cultural things?
Well, wait, hold on. I hear you saying something, and I don't know if I understand what you're saying. So let me. I think you just said that most of the marketing talent are women. Is that what you said? No. Because you said girls. Girls.
I'm just saying the girl that I have is actually a girl.
Oh, so okay.
Okay.
So, sorry.
Well,
go ahead.
I have an answer because we started with an all men.
Yeah. Could you repeat the
question?
Yeah.
I think your question is. Yeah. How do you actually make sure they are in sync, I guess, right? Like, how do you ensure that the marketers and the engineers are in sync? Because I guess if you stereotype them, they are very different in personalities. Is that your question?
Well, no. I think if I can, I have a lot of experience in this because I worked for Microsoft, and if there is a company on earth that is not a really great marketing company, it's marketing. It's Microsoft. No, and this is an honest criticism that you will hear within the company. And the debate within the company is even, we are an engineering company. We engineer software, great software products for people who use them for very critical and complex problems. So if you're marketing, and I'm sorry, I don't want to take away from the thought leaders on our panel, but there is a difference between marketing and engineering. An engineer is going to think about a product in terms of what it does, the problem it solves, what are its components, who uses it, and how to get it out the door and shipped, right? The marketing person is, to some engineer's mind, off daydreaming about what it means and why does it feel good to use it and whatnot. The classic example of this is when people always say, well, Apple's a marketing company. It's just a marketing company. But there's something very crucial that both marketing and engineering do together. It's called design. Design is that story about what engineering is doing in a sort of marketing ethos. And marketing is what's going on in the consumer's mind, right? And that could be an enterprise consumer, I think. It could be a retail consumer, and it could be someone using a mobile app. So I don't mean to take over the panel, but if I'm a person who's running a company and I have a marketing staff and engineering staff, first of all, I don't try to keep them separate. Because each role in a company has one really significant job, in my opinion. Oh, sorry. I just said I'm sorry to myself. That job is to find out how this product is playing out in somebody else's mind. And I think the marketing people on that side of the discussion have a very sharp insight into what the emotions are around that, what the problem is around that. And so all you've got to do with the engineering side, the marketing side, is say, hey, let's sit down together and talk. How are we going to tell this story together? Now, it takes a much more creative person than me to actually figure out how you're going to do that. Because engineers take a lot of pride in what the product does, and they really want to talk about the product. Marketing people care a lot about the consumer and what's happening outside of the doors. But I think it begins with, I think the CEO's role is to be that person who weaves together that story. Both of them have an equal weight in the telling of the marketing. And that's the one thing that I would say. The question I would have for May, because you talk to these enterprise-level people, are they more interested in what the product does, or are they more interested in what is it going to do for them in terms of how it's going to help or change what they're doing as a brand?
So at this moment, most of the companies that I'm talking to is they already have, they already know what kind of problem they have with the existing analytic tools. So for us, at this moment, we customize solution for them to suit their needs.
Mm-hmm. So mostly you're saying the discussion, because of its early stage, maybe, it has to be more about product-centric.
Yes, it has to be.
Kath, you're in the media. I mean, your startup is a media startup.
Yeah.
What is the marketing engineering pairing like there?
Well, like I said, our team is great. We actually have every Monday we have lunch together. Half our team are female. So yes, predominantly the marketing side, but no, we have 2 engineers. There are female as well. So we try to have diversity is really important to me because even in my banking days, I was chair of our women's network. So I understand the value of a diverse team. Half our team is actually female, and I have to say, the energy level and the culture totally went up when we when we're 50-50 female-male ratio. Like, everyone dressed better, everyone stayed longer. So,
Are you
I don't
saying
know,
men?
like,
Wait, who dresses better? Who was the influence there?
the engineers dress better.
Oh, I see.
when we had so, you know, like, I don't know, like, we had a very different experience, I guess. Yeah, we don't have a dress code, but they no longer wear shorts. So we're now in an office and not in our apartment. So, you know, like, I think there are ways to, you know, change that culture where they, you know, have a social environment. Like, we have outings together once in a while and so forth. So I think having that personal, like, having, like, lunch every Monday together can change things already. And that's just from me.
Ben, what about you? Yours primarily an engineering culture,
Yeah.
I think, right?
Yeah. Well, yeah, and we have lunch all together every day. But I think, if I understand your problem correctly, I think that is a kind of common problem in engineering team in a startups, is that the engineering team have no idea why the marketing team keep telling them to change the product or something like that. Like, maybe they want to change the landing page every once in a while. They want to change the button larger, smaller, and then larger again, turn it into red, green, and then red again. What the hell am I doing here? So usually engineering. I have an engineering background, so I think the answer to engineer is that you need. So that's why you need a project or product manager, is that he need to force the marketing or the design or the growth to explain clearly and in data why you are making such change. So the engineer who are actually doing the task wouldn't feel like he is the guy doing the job and everyone is sitting back and then say, hey, you should do that. It doesn't work that way. And it also helps the marketer, because I think Hong Kong have a good talent of engineering, but then when we sorry, maybe my personal bias, but when we actually go to marketing for startup, I actually always have a hard time to find that kind of people, because when I try to hire from agency, like they are getting used to working with big brands, and then they have a lot of experience in maybe TV ad but what about growth hack? Like, what about trying to get your product on product hunt? Who do you go to?
This is a really interesting question here, an interesting problem. I have this on. Does this work? Does this work better? I just wanted to get the microphone away from Ben. I'm the project manager. I'm intervening. No, this is a really interesting thing to me, because I think if anyone out there is starting a business, I don't think marketing anymore works as a broad distribution of a message. I think that we live in a world now where it's about people networks, who you know, what they believe, how they feel, and getting the first iterations of your product to those people who can influence the spread of that product, right? And in that case, an engineer's time is well worth investing also in the marketing message and also in how it's feeling and working in the hands of the people who are using it. And the simple reason is because it no longer takes a lot of energy or time or money to get excitement to the next person. I think we all live now in a technology world that's like being in a rave. Who's been to a rave? This guy. Yeah, I remember you. Or who's been to a club where there's a lot of great DJ music, EDM or something like that? Like you ever know that feeling when the beat drops, right? Like, seriously, you're sitting there, you're like, oh, this is my jam. And you're all waiting, you're like, and it all happens at the same time. Really great products, and this is why Product Hunt was sort of built. When you feel and you use a really great product, you just want to tell everybody about it. You now are the advertisement. You are the newspaper, you're the magazine, you're the radio show. And when you use something like Notey or your mobile app, or you find a Starbucks cup with your brand image, right? If I'm in that business and I have that experience, I just got to tell somebody about it because I finally feel good about what I'm doing. So if you can I think if you can get the engineer and the marketing people to sit down in that sort of rave EDM moment with that product, then there's going to be no misunderstanding. This is why we have to do this. So I think when it comes to this too, like media also works inside of your company, because that's how you tell the culture. That's how you tell the culture story. Now that this has become my panel, I'd like to give the microphone back to Kath and just say we have time. Let me just do one more question for the audience. Oh, now we have several. Interesting. You, sir, who have been to the rave, what is your question?
So my co-founder and I just got into a fight about what is the definition of MVP about the product. Because we have an idea, we want to validate the idea before we launch it. With more development effort, it's much of the market. So what is your definition of an MVP for a B2B business?
Okay. For a B2B business, can you tell us anything about the product before we, because I think it's specific to the product.
Yeah, so it's a fashion app.
Okay.
It needs users to use it. We need to generate the user base. And then I'm going to use that data into the business thing. We're going to use
Sure.
that data and market it.
Sure. So the question then is, how do you know you have an MVP when you have an MVP? Like, what is it? What is the real definition of an MVP?
And what is the purpose? Is it to fundraise or is it to?
To make sure that there is a demand for that. People actually download the app.
So you guys had a fight because you couldn't decide whether you had the MVP yet?
He's an engineer. He doesn't want to put more development effort.
Okay.
That's the idea.
Okay.
Well, it seems like you're looking for. So who would be your customers? Like, have you? I think.
Users, whoever would buy a fashion product.
Well-
Okay, and have you gone out to get a feedback, like studies, or talk to influencers in that space?
We did a private beta and tried to get feedback from family and friends, but they usually don't get.
Yeah, don't go to family and friends.
Yes,
I mean, we love them, but they're not the best people to go to for feedback.
So basically, is there any consensus, no matter what business you're in, on what is the MVP of the MVP? Like, how do you know you have an MVP?
Yeah, maybe you.
An MVP means minimum viable product, just in case.
So if you want to just verify what you're doing is in the right path, then the simplest MVP I would say is just make a website that has sign-up form, and then just spend maybe $300 for Google advertisement, and then see if people are interested in signing up to listen to your products, listen to about your products more. That can be the simplest MVP, I think, in terms of
Or I would just for example, I would show my product in its early days to someone like Doug, right? Who knows the media space and get his feedback on it and be like, tell me honestly, would you use this? Do you think the market needs this? For fashion, unfortunately, I wouldn't go to you, Doug, even though you're very well dressed. I would, maybe just reach out to a few fashion bloggers in Hong Kong. I don't know, people who have influence, right?
But I think his question is actually a more abstract question, which is how can you convince your engineer that you need more, right? I guess the struggle was that you wanted to build an MVP, you thought you needed more to add to that MVP, and the engineer was like, no, we've done it enough. I think the answer to the question always is there can be many types of MVPs, and the MVP that is enough is the one that actually works. And until you get to that point where it works, you don't have it, right? But that doesn't also mean, and the engineer may want to weigh in here, that you keep adding things to the initial thing. That doesn't make it an MVP either. That's feature creep, and that can actually ruin whatever the MVP is. We only have 5 minutes. You want to explain a little more?
Okay, so if I can only say one thing is that MVP, if you want to convince an engineer what is MVP, ask him can we learn something out of this product? If the answer is yes, that is the MVP. That's the minimal set of feature that you can learn something. That's it.
Very simple. So we're running out of time. I want to thank each one of the people here. Ben, thank you for coming. Kath, May. And stick around, ask some questions.